Morgan Wallen didn't just break into country music. He exploded onto the scene with a voice that felt like it carried the soul of Tennessee itself. Fans couldn't get enough of his raw, unpolished style, and every single he released seemed to strike gold. In no time, he was a country sensation, a name on everyone's lips, dominating the charts with hits like Whiskey Glasses. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing, one that no one could see coming. As his star rose higher and higher, Morgan's life started unraveling in ways no one expected. Fame, once a dream, began to twist into something darker, something that would start chipping away at him. To the public, he seemed unstoppable, but beneath the spotlight's glare, Morgan was struggling. Every choice he made, every move he took, was watched and scrutinized by a world hungry for more. He was Nashville's new golden boy, but behind that image was a man beginning to crack under the weight of it all. The pressure, the expectations, the fame, it was all building up. And while his fans cheered, Morgan was facing a reality that would eventually push him to the very edge. This was only the beginning, and the road ahead would reveal the side of Morgan Wallen that few knew existed. As Morgan Wallen's fame continued to skyrocket, so did the scrutiny on his every move. He wasn't just a rising star anymore. He was a headline, but the pressures of the spotlight and the challenges he faced in his personal life soon collided in ways that neither he nor his fans could have predicted. What started as minor incidents quickly spiraled, grabbing the attention of media outlets eager for a story, and Morgan gave them plenty to talk about. The first controversy hit when a video surfaced of Morgan partying a little too hard, an image that both thrilled and shocked his fan base. For some, it was part of his charm, the unfiltered, bad boy persona that had drawn people to him in the first place. But for others, it raised questions. Could he handle the fame? Was he letting success get to his head? It didn't take long for these questions to be followed by louder, harsher criticism. Then came the backlash that would rock his career and threaten to destroy the brand he had built. In early 2021, a private video of Morgan using offensive language went viral, sparking an outcry across social media and beyond. The response was swift and brutal. Fans who had once cheered him on were left disappointed, while the media condemned him with headlines that painted him as a cautionary tale, a young star burning too brightly and too fast. The fallout was immediate. Radio stations pulled his music, streaming platforms removed his songs from playlists, and even his record label put his contract on hold. Almost overnight, Morgan went from Nashville's golden boy to public enemy number one. But while some fans turned their backs, others stood by him, insisting that he deserved a second chance. Social media was flooded with both condemnation and support, creating a divide within his fan base. The country music industry, too, was split. Some saw Morgan's actions as unforgivable, while others argued he was simply a young man making mistakes, just like anyone else. The question loomed, was this the end of Morgan Wallen's career, or could he bounce back from what seemed like an irreparable fall from grace? Through it all, Morgan remained silent, watching as his life and career spun out of his control. He was facing the consequences of his actions, but the toll was heavier than he could have ever imagined. Behind the scenes, he was grappling with regret, isolation, and an overwhelming sense of loss. His dream had brought him to the top, but it had also become a nightmare. Yet, even as his world seemed to be crumbling, Morgan's story was far from over. The path to redemption wouldn't be easy, but in these darkest moments, he would begin to find the strength to confront his demons and seek a way forward. And while the public debated his fate, Morgan was gearing up for a comeback that no one would see coming. With the world watching his every move and a wave of backlash crashing over him, Morgan Wallen was left facing his darkest struggles yet, many of which had been brewing long before he became a household name. The fame, the pressures, and the relentless scrutiny had all become more than he could handle. Beneath the spotlight, Morgan was carrying the weight of personal battles that he kept hidden from everyone but those closest to him. Behind the scenes, Morgan was grappling with issues that had haunted him for years. One of the biggest struggles, substance use. For Morgan, alcohol initially seemed like a way to unwind, a brief escape from the demands of the industry. But as the pressure mounted, that escape became a dependency. Nights that should have been spent preparing for his next show or planning his next career move were often replaced with nights spent drowning his frustrations. At first, it was harmless. A drink here, a drink there, a way to calm his nerves. But before long, alcohol became a crutch he leaned on more heavily than he ever anticipated. Friends and family could see the toll this lifestyle was taking on him. They saw Morgan becoming more and more withdrawn, more reckless, and more distant. But as is often the case, Morgan's inner circle couldn't force him to face his struggles. He had to come to that realization on his own. Yet, the longer he kept these struggles hidden, the worse they became. The man that fans saw on stage, The confident, larger-than-life Morgan Wallen was beginning to feel like a stranger to himself. The public controversies only served to deepen his reliance on alcohol. The pain of being cast out by an industry he loved, combined with the personal shame he felt for letting down his fans, became overwhelming. To Morgan, it felt like there was no one who truly understood the pressures he was facing. Every headline, every harsh word, every lost opportunity weighed on him like a crushing burden. And instead of confronting his issues head-on, he buried them, using alcohol as a temporary solution to problems that demanded real answers. As his inner turmoil grew, so did his public struggles. Morgan's behavior became increasingly erratic, and those around him began to worry that he was on a destructive path he couldn't escape from. To them, it was clear that he was spiraling, but to Morgan, the thought of truly confronting his issues felt impossible. The fear, shame, and regret were too much to bear. Yet, this downward spiral would eventually lead him to a breaking point, a moment where he'd be forced to face his struggles or risk losing everything he'd worked for. It was a moment that would shake him to his core, but it would also be the beginning of his journey back. Morgan Wallen was about to realize that, even in his darkest moments, there was still hope for redemption. Morgan Wallen had reached his lowest point, a moment of reckoning that would either make or break him. The controversies, the isolation, the struggle with addiction, everything had built up to an almost unbearable weight pressing down on him. To the outside world, he was a talented country artist who had lost his way. But for Morgan, it was far more personal. He wasn't just losing his career, he was losing himself. It was during this time that Morgan began to question everything. Fame had turned into a cage, trapping him in a lifestyle that no longer brought him joy. Music, once his passion, now felt like a burden he couldn't bear to carry. He was haunted by his mistakes and gripped by a relentless cycle of self-blame and regret. In moments of clarity, he wondered if it was all worth it. The pressure, the expectations, the endless judgment. He was exhausted. For the first time in his life, Morgan considered walking away from it all, leaving behind the fame, the spotlight, and even his music. "I almost gave up everything," he would later admit, a quiet acknowledgement of the depth of his despair. It was more than just a thought. It was a real possibility, a moment when he could feel the weight of everything slipping from his grasp. In those dark hours, he faced himself in ways he never had before. Every misstep, every headline, every look of disappointment from the people he loved, it all played over in his mind like a relentless movie he couldn't turn off. He was spiraling, and it felt like there was no way out. But just when he was ready to walk away, something began to shift. In his darkest moments, Morgan found himself reaching out to those closest to him, family, friends, and even a few industry mentors who saw past his mistakes. These people reminded him of who he was before the fame, of the dreams that had once fueled his passion. They didn't judge him. Instead, they listened, helping him see that his life didn't have to be defined by his lowest points. Through their support, he began to realize that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way forward. This was his breaking point, but it was also a turning point. Morgan started to understand that he didn't have to be perfect to be worthy of redemption. He began to see that facing his demons wasn't just a personal responsibility. It was a chance to reclaim his life and rediscover his love for music. In this moment of clarity, Morgan made a decision. He wasn't going to walk away. He was going to fight for his career, for his relationships, and for himself. The road ahead would be hard, but Morgan Wallen was ready to confront his past and build a future worth living for. After hitting rock bottom, Morgan Wallen faced a choice. He could either let his darkest moments define him, or he could begin the difficult journey of rebuilding. Determined not to let his mistakes be his legacy, he decided to face his issues head-on. But this path wasn't one he would walk alone. Surrounded by people who believed in him despite everything, Morgan found himself supported by a network of family, friends, and even some surprising allies within the industry. These were the people who saw him at his worst and, instead of walking away, stayed to help him find his way back. His mother, always a steady presence in his life, became his anchor. Her unconditional love and forgiveness reminded him that no matter how far he fell, he still had a foundation to stand on. She urged him to remember the values he was raised with, and to use this painful chapter as a lesson rather than a life sentence. Morgan also leaned on his friends, those who knew him before the fame and weren't afraid to be brutally honest. They reminded him of the person he was beneath the celebrity, a guy from Tennessee who loved music and who, once upon a time, was driven by pure passion rather than public approval. Beyond his family and friends, a few industry figures reached out, recognizing his potential for redemption. These mentors saw his raw talent and believed that, with the right guidance, Morgan could rise above his past mistakes. They helped him refocus on his music, showing him how to channel his pain into his art. Through their support, Morgan began to reconnect with the passion that had originally led him to country music. Writing songs became a therapeutic outlet, a way to express his regret, his struggles, and his hopes for a better future. Slowly, he began to find himself again. Morgan also took steps to regain the trust of his fans. He acknowledged his mistakes publicly, offering sincere apologies and pledging to be better. He didn't make excuses. Instead, he admitted his flaws and promised to work on himself. For many fans, this vulnerability was a turning point. Morgan's openness and honesty resonated, reminding them that despite his fame, he was human, someone who had faltered but was willing to grow. The journey wasn't easy, and redemption didn't come overnight. Every step required commitment and resilience, a willingness to confront his past and learn from it. But through this process, Morgan found strength he hadn't known he had. His setbacks became the groundwork for a comeback that was more than just about music. It was about proving to himself and the world that he could rise above his mistakes. This wasn't just about salvaging a career. It was about personal growth, about transforming pain into purpose. Morgan Wallen was no longer running from his mistakes. Instead, he was using them as fuel for a new chapter, one that would redefine who he was and what he stood for. With a renewed sense of purpose and the support of those who believed in him, Morgan Wallen began the climb back to the life and career he almost lost. This wasn't about erasing his past. It was about learning from it and moving forward. The country music world watched closely, some skeptically and others with hope, as Morgan took one step after another toward redemption. His comeback wasn't just a return to the stage. It was a reinvention. Determined to channel his experiences into something meaningful, Morgan poured himself into his music like never before. His songs took on a deeper, more personal tone, addressing themes of regret, forgiveness, and resilience. Fans could sense the change. His music was raw, vulnerable, and real in a way it hadn't been before. Tracks that touched on his struggles and redemption resonated with listeners who saw parts of their own lives in his lyrics. He was no longer just the bad boy of country music. He was an artist who had faced his demons and come out stronger. But Morgan didn't stop there. In a surprising move, he began collaborating with artists from different genres, breaking boundaries and appealing to a broader audience. While some fans were skeptical of these collaborations, they proved to be a stroke of genius. Morgan was redefining himself, showing that his journey had taught him to take risks and defy expectations. Working with hip-hop and pop artists wasn't just a career move. It was a statement that he was evolving, unafraid to step outside the traditional country box. Beyond the music, Morgan also took on charitable initiatives, partnering with organizations dedicated to helping those struggling with addiction and mental health issues. His efforts to give back weren't about PR. They were part of his commitment to make amends and to use his influence for good. These actions showed fans and critics alike that his journey was genuine, that he wasn't just trying to rebuild his image, but was truly dedicated to making a difference. Gradually, the industry started to take notice. The very platforms that had distanced themselves from him began to welcome him back, and radio stations once again filled the airwaves with his music. While not everyone was ready to forgive and forget, there was a growing acknowledgement that Morgan Wallen had come a long way from the man he was at his lowest point. The surprising moves Morgan made in his career and personal life transformed him from a star in crisis to an artist with purpose. Fans who had once been disappointed found new respect for him, and new listeners discovered his music, drawn by his story of redemption. His journey wasn't without its bumps, and there were still challenges ahead. But Morgan was no longer running from his mistakes. He was embracing them as part of his story, using them to fuel his art and inspire those who had followed him through the highs and lows. As he took the stage once more, this time with a renewed sense of self, Morgan Wallen was ready to show the world that he was here to stay, changed, humbled, and more determined than ever. As Morgan Wallen's career took a steady path forward, he reflected on the journey that had brought him back from the edge. It wasn't just his reputation or his career that had changed. It was his entire perspective on life, fame, and the responsibility that came with it. The once carefree artist had emerged from his struggles with a maturity he hadn't known he was capable of, and he was determined to use his platform with greater care and purpose. One of the biggest lessons Morgan took from this journey was understanding the weight of his influence. Fame had once felt like a dream, a chance to do what he loved and be celebrated for it. But now he realized that the power he held came with a responsibility, not just to his fans, but to himself. He'd learned the hard way that his actions didn't just impact him. They affected those who looked up to him and those who depended on him. This realization was humbling, and it changed the way he approached his life and career. Morgan also came to see his struggles as a source of strength rather than shame. For years, he'd hidden his inner battles, feeling that vulnerability had no place in his image. But now he understood that sharing his journey, flaws and all, could actually inspire others who face similar challenges. His honesty about his mistakes, the temptations he'd fallen into, and the journey to recovery became a part of his story, not as something to be erased, but as something to be learned from. Fans who had followed him from the beginning appreciated this transparency, and it brought him closer to his audience in ways he hadn't anticipated. With this new outlook, Morgan began to make music that resonated on a different level. No longer focused on just crafting hits, he was pouring real experiences, struggles, and growth into his work. The vulnerability in his lyrics, the sincerity in his performances, all of it reflected the man he had become. His music was no longer just entertainment. It was a message to those who might be facing their own dark moments, reminding them that redemption is always possible. Beyond music, Morgan began advocating for causes close to his heart, especially those related to mental health and addiction recovery. His involvement wasn't about repairing his image. It was a genuine effort to give back and use his experiences to create positive change. His journey had taught him the importance of having support and resources, and he wanted to ensure others had access to the help they needed. In the end, Morgan Wallen's darkest moments became his greatest teachers. They reshaped him, refined his character, and gave him a purpose beyond fame. He was no longer just a country music star. He was a man with a mission, a voice with meaning, and a living example that even the hardest falls can lead to a stronger comeback. With the lessons of his past firmly behind him, Morgan Wallen looks to the future with a renewed sense of purpose. His journey has been anything but smooth, marked by hard-won battles and painful realizations. Yet through it all, he's emerged stronger, carrying with him a deeper understanding of who he is and the impact he has on those around him. Now, more than ever, Morgan is committed to making music that speaks from the heart, rooted in truth and growth. Fans have stood by him through his highs and lows, and he's determined to honor their loyalty by staying true to himself and to them. His new projects reflect this shift, a blend of the raw authenticity his fans love, infused with the hard-earned wisdom he's gained along the way. He's no longer just singing about life. He's singing about life lived, mistakes made, and redemption found. The road ahead won't be without challenges, but Morgan is prepared to face them with the resilience he's built over the years. He's embraced his past, but he's no longer defined by it. As he steps forward, he does so with a clear vision, to be an artist who isn't afraid to grow, to stumble, and to rise again. For Morgan Wallen, the story is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning.